So this ostrich farm in BC has received a lot of love from Dr. Oz, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and a lot of other supporters. They all want to save a flock of 400 ostriches on a BC farm. But there's a catch. The birds were in contact with a deadly virus, H5N1, a type of avian flu. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency ordered the birds to be culled because of an outbreak in December of last year, where 69 of 468 ostriches died. That order led to a legal fight between the CFIA and the owner, Universal Ostrich. They say the ostriches shouldn't be culled because the remaining birds have survived the outbreak and could be studied. Since then, a number of claims have been made about the birds, including that they are unique in surviving H5N1. I asked an infectious disease veterinarian about that.
As expected, not everyone dies with influenza when it comes to ostriches. Different species have different responses to it, and we don't expect all individuals to die. And it probably worked its way through. The challenge is we don't know that, and influenza can circulate in individuals without causing signs of disease.
But during court hearings earlier this year, the owner pleaded their case, claiming that the birds have herd immunity. But the infectious disease veterinarian says that's a tough claim to prove.
Well, think about us with influenza, right? We can get influenza a variety of times. Sure, you've survived influenza. You may be protected to some degree, but you certainly can't say this group of birds is never going to get influenza again.
Meanwhile, the former TV host and current administrator for the US Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, has claimed that the birds hold
huge scientific value to the global community
because they have survived the virus. But a virologist I spoke to said this wouldn't be new research.
People have done experimental studies infecting ostriches with H5N1 and other avian influenza subtypes. So you wouldn't really be learning necessarily anything new. So that part has certainly been overstated by Dr. Oz.
And other Trump officials like US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrote in a letter to the CFIA that says he believes significant scientific knowledge may be garnered from following the ostriches in a controlled environment. But is that actually possible?
It's very difficult to test for influenza antibodies in almost any species, because we've all been infected with flu so many times. So the tests you have to use to try to address some of the technical issues with this often require live virus in a containment laboratory. And I'm quite certain that the ostrich farm does not have access to that.
Survivors probably have antibodies in them, just like you have antibodies if you've gotten through flu. So there's not really anything too unique about that. There have been a lot of comment about, how these are important for research, valuable for research, but no one's actually ever said what, right? What are we actually going to get out of these individuals? And what value is there versus risk?
That risk is why the CFIA has ordered the birds to be culled in the first place. H5N1 strain of avian influenza is currently being monitored worldwide, and while it mainly affects birds, it can spread to other animals and humans. BC has already been largely affected by a spread of avian flu, with over 8 million birds impacted. There was also one human case of H5N1 in BC earlier this year that required critical care in hospital. Along with some cases in the US, one resulted in death. The experts I spoke to say that the more the virus is spread, the more it could mutate and further affect livestock and humans.
Every time it jumps into a mammal, or especially jumps into a person, it can change. And the big concern would be is if it combines with a mammalian virus. That's how we get pandemic flu viruses.
The CFIA says the response to H5N1 is an approach known as stamping out. That response follows the CFIA's agreement with the World Organization for Animal Health.
Canada is party to trade agreements, which essentially means that if there is an outbreak of H5N1 bird flu on a poultry farm, which ostriches are considered poultry, then the first line response to that is by culling the entire flock. The stamping out policy itself is really required because this is the only way to prevent H5N1 from spreading. And when it does spread, especially to certain species of poultry, especially chickens and turkeys, it really wipes out the entire flock in a pretty gruesome way.
The experts I spoke to say culling is the typical method used when fighting an outbreak like this, but they say this case does raise questions about whether culling is the only option.
If you had a farm that said, okay, I've got influenza here, we're going to report this right away, we think we can avoid a cull, we want to talk about this, and while we're doing this, we're going to do everything possible to contain this virus. I can get on board with that. This situation is different though.
And Wheeze says this case is different because according to court documents, the ostriches were in open pens with free access to wild birds and animals. Even after quarantine orders were put in place, inspectors noted wild animals were interacting with the ostriches and other safety measures weren't followed.
They've been posting pictures of themselves with the birds without PPE. They've invited a convoy to the farm that's quarantined. This is not a situation where you get confidence that they're doing what they can do to contain the disease while you're fighting this.
Wheeze says this particular case has gone beyond the typical response to control a disease outbreak.
It's moved away from disease control and the animals in a lot of ways to anti-government, anti-regulation, to a variety of other talking points beyond disease.